You never chose it just for what it is. You chose it for what it communicates, even without realizing it. A house was never just about living. You were born into a house you didn't choose. Modest, small, enough for what life allowed at that moment. A studio, an apartment with few bedrooms. Your parents married young. The first child came soon, and money was tight. The house was what fit the budget, not what fit the dream. And you grew up in that shared space, maybe without your own room, maybe sleeping in the living room. You learned that space is a privilege, that having a corner just for yourself is something you earn. This lesson stayed with you long before you knew you were learning something. A child who learns to make a territory within a space that doesn't belong to them is learning about resilience and desire. A desire that will grow for decades before being satisfied. There's something specific that happens to a child who doesn't have their own room. They develop a relationship with space that children who always had a room don't develop. They learn the value of territory, that privacy is not a right, it's an achievement. And they carry these lessons for decades. Sometimes as motivation, the promise that one day they'll have the room, the house, the space they never had. Sometimes as a wound, a feeling that they don't deserve to occupy much space. At 20, there was a desire that went beyond financial independence. It was the hunger for privacy, to watch whatever you wanted, to sleep at the time you chose, to exist without having to negotiate space with anyone. It seemed small, but it wasn't. It was the first time you wanted a house not for what it was worth, but for what it represented inside, a place where you could be yourself. In that way, you developed a clarity about what you wanted. Not the perfect house. Your house. 30 years old. And finally, the first property. With 25 years of payments ahead. You signed that contract and felt two things at once. The weight of the debt and the lightness of finally having arrived somewhere. The house wasn't big yet, but it was yours. And at that moment, yours was the most important word in the world. You had the strength of a lion. The world was in front of you. The house wasn't a destination. It was a declaration. I'm building something. You can take me seriously. 40 years old. The peak. And now the house wasn't about you anymore. It was about your child. You planned for this. Worked for this. Delayed. Saved. Planned. All to offer them something you didn't have. A spacious house. With comfort. With their own room. That room you never had as a child. Sleeping in the living room while dreaming of a space just for you. You looked at this room. Tidy. Theirs. With the door closed. And felt something that's hard to name. It wasn't just pride. It was a debt being paid. Not financial. A debt to the version of you that once slept in the living room and swore that when you became a parent, it would be different. And it was. 50 years old. And for the first time in your life, the house starts to be about you again. The dream appears, a house on the beach. Or a country house. A place to rest. To breathe differently. To wake up without commitments. You spent decades building for others. For the family. For the children. For the world's approval. And now a new question arises, almost shyly. And for me? Where's my house? Not the house of status. Not the house that impresses visitors. The house that restores. The house that, when you enter, the noise of the world stays outside. 60 years old. And the big house now echoes. The children have left. They've built their own homes. They're offering their children what you offered them. The cycle continues. But here, within these walls you fought so hard to have, there's a new silence. It's not a bad silence. It's a silence that asks questions. Who is this house for now? Who are these rooms for? Who is this space for that took you decades to build? And you realize something no one warned you about. The house was always too big to be just a house. It carried the weight of everything you wanted to prove. that you arrived, that you succeeded, that you were a better parent than you had. And when the children leave, the house isn't empty of people. It's empty of purpose. The house was never just about living. In childhood, it was about scarcity. At 20, it was about freedom. At 30, it was about declaration. At 40, it was about repair. At 50, it was about restoration. And at 60, it was about the question the house always asked, but you could only hear when it was silent. You spent your whole life building space for others. And it was different. But now, in this silence, there's one last house to build. The hardest of all, the one that has no address. The one that doesn't appear in photos. The one that doesn't impress anyone. The house within you, where you finally live. And building this inner house is the longest and most honest work of adult life. Because it has no financing, no approved plan, no delivery deadline. It builds slowly. In every moment when you choose to be honest instead of correct. Every time you say no when you mean no. Every night you can be silent with yourself without escaping to noise. Brick by brick. Choice by choice. Over decades. The house you sought for decades had an address. Number. Zip code. The house you will inhabit for the rest of your life doesn't. It's anywhere you arrive whole. Where you don't have to shrink to fit. Where you don't have to negotiate who you are to be accepted. This house you carry with you. And building it. This inner construction that doesn't appear on any deed is the longest and most rewarding work there is. Because unlike the brick one, it doesn't depreciate. It has no maintenance cost you don't want to pay. It doesn't need renovation when the market changes. It gets better with each year honestly lived. With each crisis crossed without fleeing from yourself. With each choice made from the inside out, instead of from the outside in. You spent decades building the house for others to see. What remains now is to build the one only you inhabit. And this is the most important construction of your entire life. The only one you take when you leave anywhere. The only one no financial crisis can dispossess, no market can depreciate, no third party can take.